Hey everybody, this video is going to go over the PowerPoint on thesis statements. If you don't know what a thesis statement is, you definitely want to pay attention to this video and go through the PowerPoint really well. Thesis statements are one of the most crucial elements in anything you write, any kind of academic paper. So, it sounds important, but what is it? Your thesis statement is your main point, the whole point to the essay that you're writing. It should be an attention getter, it should be a powerful statement, it should communicate your viewpoint on your topic, it sets the tone for the rest of the essay, and if it's done really well, it will determine the organization for the body of the essay. And we'll get to that here in a few moments, how you accomplish that. So it should be powerful, assertive, provocative, debatable, but it's not a rant. You know, you want to keep the tone appropriate. Looking at slide 5, a thesis statement is a complete sentence. It should not sound like an essay title. It passes the, well, duh, test. In other words, your thesis statement should not merely state a fact, but it should make a debatable or arguable assertion, right? And it doesn't have to be like super debatable like politics and religion, but it should still have some sort of underlying assertion to it, that you're still trying to convey a point of view about something. Because if you're writing an essay and all you're doing is just regurgitating facts, it's not going to be very interesting. Unless, of course, that's exactly what you've been asked to do, which could be the case sometimes. But more than likely, your instructor's looking for something more than just regurgitating facts. They're looking for you to engage with the topic, right? So, it typically appears, the thesis statement typically appears at the beginning of your paper. It is usually the last sentence of your introductory paragraph. Now, that's not a hard rule, but that tends to be the formula that most people use, the template. And we'll get into introductory paragraphs, in the next lesson. But your thesis statement often appears as the last sentence of your introductory paragraph, right? And it allows the introduction to act like a funnel. So if you think about the shape of a funnel, it's very wide up at the top. We're going to learn when we talk about introductions, it's wide because we draw our readers in. You know, you draw more readers in with a wider net, right? So you start off very wide and general up at the top. And as the introduction continues, it gets narrower and narrower. And at the very bottom of the funnel is your thesis statement. Because that is where we get to the laser focus of your essay, right? What you do not want to do, though, is announce your thesis. You don't want to make any kind of apologetic or very amateur, elementary announcements. You don't want to say, the purpose of this essay is to explain blah, blah, blah. Or, I intend to prove that such and such causes air pollution, you know, or in this paper I will discuss. You don't want to do things like that. You want your thesis statement to be a very natural part of your introduction, right? We know you're writing a paper. We know this is an essay. You don't have to announce it, okay? Just let it be a natural result of the rest of the introductory paragraph. The thesis statement should act as an umbrella, right? So you've got this umbrella, and it's going to contain all the elements of the essay. And what I mean by that is your main points. So let's say, for instance, you have a topic and you have 3 main points to it, okay, that you're going to discuss in the body of the paper. Those 3 main points, if you have a really good thesis statement, those 3 main points would be listed. You would mention them in the thesis statement. And now your reader knows not only what your topic is, what you intend to do with it, but they know the three things that you're going to discuss in the body of the essay. It's very nice to have some sort of idea of what's to come in the rest of the essay. Give that to your reader. So a thesis statement also needs to be precise. It needs to be super focused. Now, that's not always easy to do at the beginning. So sometimes we start with what I like to call a working thesis. And it might be very general and big at the beginning. So I have an example here on slide 5. We start off with Batman's personality is more complex than Superman's. That's a lot, though, if you think about it. I mean, we don't really know what the author means by that. But that was a good place to start. And as they did their pre-writing, as they started doing research, as they started maybe even drafting, they realized that, you know what? When I say Batman and Superman, people might think of all different kinds of things. They might think about the TV shows. They might think about the cartoons. They might think about the movies. They might think about the comic books. So what am I really focusing on? Am I going to be talking about Batman and Superman and how they appear in all those forms? That's too much for a paper. That's like a book. So what I'm really interested in, if I think about it, I'm actually really interested in comparing them in the early edition of the comics. So I'm going to go back and revise my thesis statement to reflect that. In the early editions of Batman and Superman comics, Bruce Wayne's personality is more complex than Clark Kent's. Awesome. Except, as I continue doing research, continue thinking about it, continue drafting, I skipped a step there, didn't I? Yeah. In the early editions of Batman and Superman comics, Batman's personality is more complex than Superman's. But then I realize after I do more research and think about it more, I'm actually not even talking about them when they're in their superhero form. I'm actually talking about them and thinking about them when they're their alter egos. So I revise it again for that. In the early editions of Batman and Superman comics, Bruce Wayne's personality is more complex than Clark Kent's. Now, I am almost there. I am almost super precise with this thesis statement. I have narrowed the focus considerably. But I know that if I say that Bruce Wayne is, that his personality is more complex, what does that even mean? First of all, our personalities are made up of all different things. Am I going to be talking about their whole personality, every aspect of their personality? And what do I mean by more complex? I realize as I keep doing my work that I'm actually looking at how Bruce Wayne is more pessimistic. That's really at the heart of the essay. So again, I'm going to revise the thesis to reflect that. And what I end up with is, in the early edition of Batman and Superman comics, Bruce Wayne is more pessimistic than Clark Kent. And now I have provided my reader with a very focused, precise thesis statement that gives them a much better idea of what I'm really going to do in the essay, as opposed to Batman's personality is more complex than Superman's. That doesn't really tell them much. This latest version, though, my 4th version, is super focused, and now they have a much better idea of what they're getting themselves into. The first version helped me get started, right? That was a good place to start, and you need that. You got to have something to propel you forward and, get you where you need to be. But as the last point on the slide makes a point to say, it should stay flexible. Your thesis statement is not set in stone just because you write it down when you start drafting. As we just saw, you can always come back to it and tweak it and refine it and get it to where it needs to be. And sometimes you have to write the rest of the essay before you can do that. You have to know what you ended up doing, right? You have this plan in the beginning, but it can always morph and change along the way. And you got to come back and make sure that that working thesis statement morphs and changes along with it, right? All right, so the next slide, slide 6, we have some examples of thesis statements. Some are good, some not so good. So on the left-hand side, we've got the major problems of a teenage marriage. Well, it tells me what the topic is, but that is not a complete sentence. That sounds like the title of the essay. So it definitely should not appear at the end of that introductory paragraph and try to pass itself off as a thesis statement. That's not going to cut it. Alright, so I need something that tells my reader what the essay is actually about. So I try again. About 75% of all teenage marriages in the United States end in divorce. Well, that's just a fact. You know, it's not something that is debatable, it's not something that's arguable, and I can't really do anything with that. How am I going to write a paper about how that 75% of teenage marriages end in divorce? So what am I really trying to get at? When teenagers marry, they face 3 serious problems that threaten their happiness. That's what I'm really trying to get at. Yes, I want to talk about the major problems of a teenage marriage, and yes, I'm kind of springboarding off of that fact that 75% of them end in divorce. But what am I really trying to convey to my readers? I want to talk about the 3 things that I think threaten their happiness, the 3 reasons why they end in divorce. That thesis statement would have been solid gold if they had actually listed those 3 things in the thesis statement. But this is, I'm not going to be mad at this one. And especially if you have a chance to revise, you can always come back and add them in, before you submit the final draft. All right. On the right-hand side of that slide, we've got another example. Watching television affects our lives in many ways. Okay, watching television affects our lives. Got it. But does that really tell my reader what I'm going to be doing in the essay? Not really. Is it debatable? I mean, not really a fact. It sounds debatable, but is anybody going to really argue with that? Television affects our lives in many ways. Because it's so vague, I don't know if anybody would argue with that claim. I need to do something else with this. So, the average American youngster spends between 4 and 6 hours a day watching television. It's more specific now, it's not vague, but again, we're left with just a fact. It's not an argument. So let's try again. What do I really want to do with television? It's all kinds of things I can talk about. Maybe the American youngster thing is not really how I want to go. Maybe instead, I'm going to take an entirely different route, and I'm going to talk about soap operas. Soap operas are popular because they entertain, inform, and help to fulfill the viewer's emotional needs. That one is just right. It's almost perfect. We know they're going to talk about soap operas in particular, not just television in general, right? And we know we're going to talk about why they're popular. And we even know now the 3 reasons they're going to give, the 3 main points they're going to discuss in the body of the essay. They're going to explain how soap operas entertain us, how they inform us, and how they help to fulfill our emotional needs. I know exactly what's coming in the rest of that essay now. Now they just got to give me the supporting evidence to convince me. Perfect thesis statement. And then there's some more examples on slide 7, but I want to go down to slide 8, because now I have a whole introductory paragraph for you. And the idea is to see how the thesis statement fits into the introductory paragraph and how it all flows together. So for this example, we have the author Aldous Huxley once said, "To his dog, every man is Napoleon, hence the constant popularity of dogs. As you consider the pet you would like to have share your life, it is Huxley's quote that sums up why a dog is the best choice. Because of its sense of loyalty, its ability to protect you, and its great companionship, a dog is the perfect pet." I know exactly what this essay is about now. They're trying to convince me that a dog is the perfect kind of pet to get because it's loyal, it protects, and it's good companionship. Now they just have to fill in the blanks in the body of the essay to convince me of each of those things. Next example on slide 9. Imagine you are taking a math test, but you just cannot concentrate. What you really need is a piece of gum to chew so that you can chew on that difficult problem involving the slope equation that you cannot possibly remember. Everyone wants that refreshing piece of gum in his or her mouth during school. The controversy in schools today, however, is that students are not allowed this luxury. Students face punishment and are accused of creating a dirty school environment because of gum chewing. However, schools should allow students to chew gum because it can help students perform better on tests, it increases student concentration, and it increases student participation in class. So you see how they started off in this very general way, very wide at the top, and continued to narrow the focus and ended with that thesis statement that tells us exactly what the rest of the essay is about. That's our goal. We need that thesis statement there, and it needs to be as precise and focused as possible, right? Let's see. There are several other examples, but I want to go down to slide 12. It's our last example, because I want to show you that in all kinds of writing, there will be a thesis statement in the introduction, even with a story, even a narrative piece, which is telling about something you've actually experienced. It won't sound exactly like the thesis statements that we've just looked at, but it's still a sentence in the beginning that tells us exactly what to expect in the rest of the essay. So this sample paragraph here on slide 12 comes from the introductory paragraph of a narrative essay. So this author is about to share a story with us, something that he experienced that was significant to him for some reason. Okay? It's easy to note the behavioral dark spots in those around us. My father is a skinflint. When I need a loan or simply extra cash, he turns a deaf ear to my pleading hysterics. Mom is excessively moody. When something bothers her, she sulks for hours, never revealing what set her off, and we just have to wait until she gets over it. However, as a fairly normal teenager, I never thought of myself as having any particular character flaws. Yet, as I faced my brother Matthew at his bedroom door one spring afternoon last year, I became aware of the ugly features of anger and temper in my personality. So that last sentence there, it doesn't sound like the other thesis statements we've discussed already, but it is a sentence that tells us exactly what's to come. It is a controlling idea. We know that the rest of this essay is going to be about that moment. What happened standing in his brother's bedroom door? What happened? That's the story. Why is he telling it to us? Because it showed him the anger and temper that he was not aware of in himself. I know exactly what this essay is about and why he's sharing it. So even different types of writing can have and should have that type of controlling idea in the beginning. So you're going to be writing a research paper, and you're going to need one of those more formal thesis statements like we've discussed in the rest of the PowerPoint. But we're going to be reading short stories as well. Not a lot, but we will be reading a few. And I want you to think about that when we get to them. Is there a sentence or two in the beginning that clues us in to what the rest of the story is about and why? It may be very subtle, but let's see if they're there. All the other things that we're going to write, even for other classes, if you write papers, it's going to be more of that formal thesis statement that we've looked at already. But it's got to be there. You know, it's the driving force behind the whole essay. It appears at the end of the intro. Notice how each of those intros Starts off in a general way and draws us in. Midway through the introductory paragraph, it starts to narrow its focus. That narrowing leads us right into the thesis statement. And the thesis statement flowed very naturally from the beginning to the middle to the end of the introduction. It's not like they, drew us in this general way and then suddenly, abruptly stopped and said, and in this paper, I intend to show you. No, it just flowed very naturally. It was very organic. Remember that a thesis statement typically appears at the end of your introductory paragraph, states the main point, the focused main point, with a laser focus, should be debatable and not something that is already accepted as a fact. Has to be a complete sentence, and it can and should probably stay flexible as you go through the writing process, as you draft. You can always come back to it and make it more precise as you go, or at the very end, right? Alright, so we're going to be working with thesis statements and introductory paragraphs in the homework this week. If you have any questions about them whatsoever, please let me know, because it's such an important element of any paper that you write. I want to make sure everybody understands them thoroughly, so I'm here if you have any additional questions.